ability to do this as well as myself. And I'm really grateful to you for making this time, because it is a time that we can reorganize our space and time, especially those of us, I think, here who have the ability to be able to go online and do courses, or to be able to, the fact that we've met the Dharma is huge right now. It's huge. So it's a very unique opportunity, I think, for us. So if there's some way you can work in separating out whatever time of day you have to be able to do more practice, you might start to set up that example in your life, even when you go back to work, when you're able to go outside and start mixing with people. It's like, let's get this going now. This is the thing that's really going to help. So I wanted to start with a motivation, and this is from the Shakyamuni Buddha practice book. And our topic today is making friends with death. So rather than it being a morbid presentation where people think of death and get enormously afraid and anxious, we're going to weave our way through this to be able to feel more comfortable with the one thing that you can count on, is that you are going to die. So there will be times, and we will do some meditation of having the fear come up, and that's quite normal. And having the mind be a little, you might finish the 2 hours, and this is a short course, because this is normally a longer module of discovering Buddhism. You could roll it out. Sometimes I lead 10-day kind of death and dying retreats. So we're doing much more meditation and going into the areas more deeply. So it is normal if you come out a little depressed and a little down, but use that to fuel your Dharma practice. If you can please use that and let it motivate stepping up a little bit of your practice, or changing something up, maybe extending a little bit of certain sessions, because some of you have the luxury right now to do that, where you're okay financially, but you're not working that much. You're not able to do all those other distracted events and activities that we do. Not that they're bad necessarily, but we can't do those now. So why don't we do something worthwhile, making the time as meaningful as possible, if you can. So let's just, sitting comfortably, I'd just like you to reflect on this meditation. And this is from the beginning of the Shakyamuni Buddha practice booklet. Some of you are familiar with that. And I thought this would let us sit a little bit with the idea that we're going to die, if you haven't thought about it already today. So just close your eyes, you can focus, just reflect. How extremely lucky I am that I have not died yet. I'm especially lucky that my death did not happen last night. How wonderful and fortunate it is that today I'm still a human being, a state that is extremely rare. But this is not all. I have a perfect human body, which is also extremely rare. I've met the virtuous friend who reveals the unmistaken, complete path to enlightenment, and is extremely difficult to meet. I've met the Buddha Dharma, which is also extremely difficult to meet. And since I have met all of these extraordinarily fortunate circumstances, I must not waste my life in any way. I must make my life as useful as possible for infinite others. Their peace and happiness depends upon me, and my happiness is received only from their kindness. The greater use of my life for others becomes the means to achieve success and happiness for myself as well. So I'm responsible for the happiness of all sentient beings. Why? Because whether their actions are helpful or harmful to them depends completely on my own mind, on whether I have compassion or not. By generating compassion, I immediately benefit numberless other sentient beings. And at the very least, I do not harm them. May all my actions right now become only causes for me to achieve enlightenment and to bring all sentient beings to enlightenment as quickly as possible. So just taking a moment, considering, reflecting on the words I was just reading. And again, let's just have a couple minutes. We've done the gratitude meditation many times, but a couple minutes again to get in touch with gratitude. What are you grateful for right now? Just allowing ourselves to focus for a moment on what we are grateful for, the positive experiences of our lives, our own fundamental goodness. Can that light a bit of a rocket under you to feel how fortunate, how lucky I am? Just think how lucky, incredibly lucky, and let that buoyant cushion for your practice, for your life, fill beneath you. Lend you that kind of support right now. So it's from this place that we have every perfect condition and situation right now to look at our minds, to transform our minds from something less than satisfactory into the mind of an omniscient being, a Buddha. If we reach that place, and we will one day, then we're unlimited in benefiting all living beings. So take a moment setting your motivation. If you'd like to align it with the motivation I just mentioned, wonderful. Take a moment, you directing your mind in a most positive way for our time together and all the activities of the rest of your day. Please relax. You can open your eyes. These next couple hours, many of you have done this course with me before, perhaps, or with someone else. And some of it will be a review. It's always helpful to review because it can help the different parts of this explanation go a little deeper. So it's a course, again, not to wallow in morbidity, but to wake you up, because this is, and right now we're a little challenged, or very, very challenged, by the numbers increasing of people dying around the planet. And unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. So that's very unfortunate. And this morning, my local paper, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I just thought about this last night, was how many people died during the tsunami. Was that in 2006, possibly? And the one in India, in Indonesia, the earthquake. I thought there was a couple 100,000 people that died from that. Does anybody remember? Something, anyway, something, it was a lot of people. And unfortunately, so I had this thought last night, like, will it get to that realm of, and then this morning, the local paper, you know how everything is kind of in sync. And then the front headline is, there's a tsunami coming. So I wasn't really happy to see that headline, but it is going to get a tremendous amount, bit worse, but you may still just be at home doing your thing. May not, you know, endlessly affect you, but we do read these things about people dying and more people and vulnerable people and things like that. So it upsets us. What can we do? You can take care of your mind. Okay, we can't fix them. We can't solve and cure the virus right now. But fortunately, scientific people around the planet are working on that. I'm very grateful to them. And we can try to help. If you feel that you're healthy and not in a vulnerable population, there are ways, like I just bought food for, I mentioned a local food bank. I'm going to drop it off on Tuesday. I'm not going to meet with anyone. I've alcoholed all the food, the outsides of it, and I will leave it on the step at the time they tell me to come. So, you know, okay, there's in the chat, 230,000 people. Let's hope we don't go there. We don't get to that number. But it's a challenge for the planet, and maybe there's always a silver lining, I believe. So maybe through this challenge right now, because it's a global challenge, it's not just a United States challenge or an England challenge or something going on in Ghana. This is global. So we're all connected in this, we're all interconnected. And that's the only way we will get through it. And we have to transcend through it. And maybe we come out and start to reorganize some things on the planet that might better benefit people, more people. I hold out hope for that. Maybe in small ways. You know, there may be some changes. There may be some changes to your own mind. This is a course that helps you. I think that what we're going to talk about today helps you wake up to that. Let's just go through some of the traditional things first taught in the Lam Rim. And what they say is our culture doesn't like to talk about death for the most part, some of our cultures. But in Tibetan Buddhism, there are disadvantages of not thinking about death, and there are advantages for at times reflecting about death. And there's 6 of each. So the 6 disadvantages of not remembering death at all times, okay, is you don't remember the Dharma, number 1. You don't remember the Dharma. Number 2, even though you remember the Dharma, you'll postpone the practice. Think about in your own life, how often have you done that? I've got time. When I retire, you know, when my kids are grown, when I get the new job, okay, we postpone. Number 3, we may try to practice, but your practice isn't very rich, consistent, or pure. You know, it's not going that well because I don't feel the invigoration that I don't have a lot of time left. Number 4, you will lose your determination to practice Dharma and eventually may drop it altogether. A number of us have been in that situation. You know, you start a practice and yeah, you know, I do it for a little while and then not that interested. It's kind of boring. I don't want to do it anymore. And what a wonderful delight having a teacher like Lama Zopa Rinpoche who changes things up often. And why? It keeps our mind interested. We get so bored. We get so quickly bored. We're different than the Himalayans who memorize and memorize and memorize their text day after day, year after year after year. That's not the way a lot of us in Western cultures educate ourselves. So Rinpoche, out of immense kindness, keeps changing things for us, different meditations, motivations. Number 5, disadvantage. You will continue creating negative actions and become unsuitable for liberation. We don't get that focused on the Dharma, so, doesn't really matter if I do this negative thing or I'm continuing to create negative imprints in my mind. Number 6, at the time of death, you may experience tremendous regret. And that's very painful for people at having wasted this precious opportunity that you have. These are the advantages, the 6 advantages, remembering death at all times, 6 advantages. Your Dharma practice becomes very pure or good. Number 2, your Dharma actions become powerful and effective. Number 3, 3, 4, and 5 are related. They say it's beneficial to remember death in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. And they mean generally your Dharma practice, the beginning of your Dharma practice, the middle, and the end. But I think of it also as the beginning of our lives, the middle of our lives, and the end of our lives. So for instance, when you're getting your Dharma practice going in the beginning of it, when you meet the Dharma, associate maybe with a center and start taking courses, we want to get into the right habits because those habits are really hard to change later. That's why it's very important. If I think about, I'm going to die soon, death is definitely coming. So one thing I can count on, I want to make sure I've started that Dharma practice on a good footing and I've got a accurate way to do it. And the same thing early in life, whenever you meet the Dharma, whatever age you did, okay, let it invigorate what's happening. I better get to this. If you met the Dharma later in life, you don't have a lot of time. So best get to it now. And if you met the Dharma, fortunately, I was someone who met the Dharma in my late 20s, right? Well, I'm really glad I jumped on the boat right then and started ramping everything up and was able to do that. I wasn't married, I didn't have kids at the time and had the ability to, so that's left a really deep imprint for me that now it's, coming into most of my life at this point, okay? And then in the middle of your life, and the middle of your practice is when you sometimes reach a plateau of your practice and things dry up a little and you get bored and you're tired of doing this. That's when it's invigorating to think about, I'm going to die so that I can continue to keep the practice heightened. And in the middle of your life, a lot of people are building careers, buying property, trying to save money, maybe raising children, okay? So sometimes the Dharma practice ends up lessening a little bit because we're busy with other things. So can we find a way to keep a string of it going so we're still connected in that way? At the end of our Dharma practice, that's the only thing that will be there. And at the end of our lives as well, which tend to kind of match up unless you leave off your Dharma practice before you die. So that's what's going to sustain us. And I see now, and my dad passed last year, but when I would visit him in the building he was in an assisted living place, when I would visit, when I would talk to his friends there and see, and people without a spiritual practice, I notice it's kind of harder for them. And right now it's very hard for people that don't have their church or their synagogue or their Dharma center. I find it really hard where people are quite panicked because they don't have any resource like that. If it's all about your external reality, and right now that's a bit threatened. We can't go outside, we can't mix with other people, we're not doing our normal things. So that gets very challenging. The last advantage, number 6, is you will die with a satisfied, comforted mind with very few regrets if you recall death as much as possible. And again, I mentioned one of the easiest death meditations I try to do every morning is that after I have some gratitude and kind of get myself situated for just a few minutes and am so excited about my life, and I really am right now, and just feeling like I can't believe how precious my life is and what I'm able to do, is then I think, and soon I'm going to die. This situation is quickly passing away, and it is really quickly going. So I do try to think like this could be my last day, and I try to live it like it is my last day. So it's not a morbid thought to me. It's a thought that gets me out of bed with energy, and how can I be of help today to others? How can I make meaning of today for me? And that's what I really want to do. If this is my last day, I want to live it like it is. Now, this doesn't mean you don't go to work and I don't need to buy any more food. It's my last day. This is how you want to be on that last day. How would you like to be on that day? And that's the attitude you want to try to move along with yourself through all of your activities during the day. So for me, if it's about making the most meaning, I will try to do that. And you need boundaries as well. That's okay. Like yesterday, I was teaching a lot. So, and then I had some private talks with people on the phone. And finally, last night, it was about 8:30, I think. And it was a personal friend of mine who was on the morning talk and from Los Angeles. And after we were on the phone, we have these marathon phone calls because we don't talk very often. And it was getting into like an hour and a half, and I just felt so tired. And I knew I could say to him, look, I'm really beat right now. Let's pick this up. We're both going to end up, we're still going to be in isolation next week. We are. Right now my state is shut down till they optimistically say April 6th, Pennsylvania. I think it's going to continue beyond that. But right now I have another week here. So I said, and he said, oh, that'll be great. Let's pick it up next week. And that was fine because I just felt really, really tired. And so that's okay. But that's also me considering death, that I want to have energy for today. So setting limits is perfectly okay to do that. So the next thing I want to look at, something to think about: disadvantages, advantages, and can I live with this attitude that it may be my last day, like that. Okay. So the next type of death meditation we come to, that many of you are familiar with, is the 9-point death meditation. This is the traditional outlay from Tibetan Buddhism, 9-point death meditation. And I'm just going to, if you can open up your mics for a moment, we'll see if it's not too challenging, because I know we've got 37 people on. Let's try this. And there's probably more because some of you are two people watching. What I'd like to do is, this is a little quiz time, okay? And if you're not looking at any notes, okay, I'd like to know, let's talk a little bit about the 9 points. I want to see how much you know. And if you have an answer, you're going to put your hand up. Okay, there's 3 main headings called 3 roots. Under each root are 3 reasonings. And then those reasonings lead you to a resolution. Okay, everybody with me? Okay, the 3 roots. Can you raise your hand if you know what the first root is? Okay, let me see. We got some of you I know I can't see. So you don't have your problem. And God bless if you're in your pajamas, no problem at all, okay? Okay, of the people that raised their hand, I'm gonna call on who I saw raise their hand. Chase, do you wanna unmute? What's the number 1 root, the first place we start? Chase.
It's Tony.
Sorry, are you on?
Oh, is it Anthony you're referring to? Is it me?
First I had Chase, but Anthony, go ahead. What's the first root? Go for it.
That death is certain.
Thank you. Okay, death is certain. Okay, now everybody's like, oh yeah, I forgot that. Okay, death is certain. If you couldn't remember, because some of you, I see you, and I know we've been through this before, this is the time you've got to learn the 9-point death meditation. You should know it without any notes. Death is certain, first root. What's the second root? Put your hand up if you know the second root. Okay, Chase, do you want to unmute? What's the second root? Second main heading. Oh, your microphone's not working. Do you want to put it in the chat? Do you want to type it in the chat? He is really muted. Okay, he's somewhere. Okay, we're going to get somebody else. Anybody else? Second main heading. Anybody there that?
I think he typed it in the chat box.
Okay, he put it in the chat box. Time of death is uncertain. Thank you. Thank you so much. Time of death is uncertain. We got it. Okay. Well, and this is a joke to Chase privately. I'm not going to have you do my advanced work for me, but so Chase did advanced work in politics, and I used to work in politics, so we often commune around that because we know how intense that was and what we were doing, and so that was just a personal joke. Okay, third main root. The third main heading. Anyone other than Chase and Anthony who are fantastic? I commend you guys. Okay, so we've got a little study to do then. The perfect thing to do when you're holed up at home. Okay, Anthony, go for it. The third main heading. What do you remember?
Was that the wording might elude me, but it's that only spiritual practice can assist you at the time of death.
You got it. That's it. And thank you, Jack. The only thing to help is practice. Okay. Oh, Colleen, Colleen, where are you? Let me see if I can see you. I'm so sorry. Your husband died a week before the quarantine. You're in Georgia. And where are you on here? Can I see you? Oh no, you don't have your photo on. Okay. I am so sorry. Very, very sorry. We'll remind me, we'll do a dedication to him at the end. That's terrible. Very, very sad. Oh my goodness. Okay, third root. So the only thing that benefits you, so death is certain, number one, the time of death is uncertain, and the only thing that benefits us right now is our Dharma practice. Dharma practice. Okay, let's look at the three reasonings under death is certain. What do we remember? Number one reasoning. What's the number one reasoning? Anybody? Death is certain. The time is uncertain. Thanks, Nicole. No, the number one, under death is certain. That's the second heading, Nicole. The time of death is uncertain. But here's the first reasoning, is everybody dies. It's that easy. Everybody dies. There's no power in the universe that will stop death from coming to you. There's no power in the universe that will stop death from coming to you. So when we're and we'll do some meditation, but when we are meditating on this particular point, okay, and you've got time to do this now at home, but you take one reasoning a day, for instance, if you want. One reasoning a day, 10, 15 minutes. Consider, okay? Think about all the powerful people we know. If they're powerful, you think they'd maybe be able to sort death? But they can't. Look what's going on right now. The world leaders are scrambling. They don't know what to do. Okay, the scientists don't know what to do. They're working on it, but they haven't fixed it yet. Ordinary people don't know what to do. Creative people can't stop it. I think of people that have walked on the moon, died, and I think of the richest people in the world can't buy their way out of it. They die. That doesn't solve anything. So you look at all these different situations, and then I think about people like Jesus. He died. Pope John Paul II died. Mother Teresa died. Some pretty extraordinary people like Martin Luther King Jr. died. Amazing people. Gandhi died. These were extraordinary people that didn't sort a way out of death. And then I get into the Buddha died. Omniscient being with fully manifest every positive quality didn't sort a way out of death. So you'd reflect slowly on those different points to bring yourself from the intellectual understanding here, okay? Here, you know you're going to die. I think we all have that, okay? But do we have it here at the heart? Do we have it here where I have an experiential realization? I am going to die. I best get to this right now. I can't wait any longer. We really can't. We really can't. Number two, reasoning. Number two, reasoning. Under death is certain. There is, every moment you're closer to death. Every moment you're closer to death. This is a way that when you want to meditate on this, and you can do this walking around your house. You're walking to the kitchen, as many people are walking to the kitchen now. You're walking to the kitchen, you're another step closer to death, you're another step closer to death. You move your right foot, another step, you move your left foot, another step, okay? We're another Sunday right now closer to death, and we're another end of March closer to death. For some of us, we're another beginning of spring closer to death. I'm another morning closer. I'm another program closer to death. Like over and over, every moment, I'm another evening, and you watch another news program closer to death, and you watch another Netflix, whatever you're watching, closer to death. And, you know, so you want to, I'm another breakfast closer to death, another meal closer to death, another bite closer. And here you go, another breath closer. I'm another breath closer. Reminding yourself, I'm another breath. You can just do a 5-minute meditation like that, sitting on the couch, watching your breath. I inhale, I exhale, another breath closer to death, like that. Number 3, because we're going to die, there's very little time we formally practice Dharma. There's very little time we formally practice Dharma. Think about our lives right now. On average, we spend about 1/3 of our time sleeping. 1/3 of our lives are spent sleeping. If you have a 24-hour day, a lot of people sleep about 7 to 8 hours a day. That's 1/3. Okay? So you've got 1/3 done with sleeping. Then think about an average 24-hour day. How much time do you spend on your body? Meaning maybe washing it, clothing it, feeding it, exercising, putting moisturizer on your face or something or whatever, shaving, getting your hair cut, looking in the mirror, all that kind of stuff, okay? That can be a lot of time for people. Okay, so there's that time. Then you've got work. Spend a lot of time working. It depends what your work is, how valuable the work is and things. Then you've got, maybe some of you have family time, relationship time, interacting with others time. How much time do you spend in a 24-hour period, Dharma? I mean, if you're lucky, some of you are getting to like 1 or 2 hours a day. Those are the lucky ones. 1 or 2 hours a day over the course of, let's say, a 70-year life, formal practice. So basically they say for formal practice, for an average Dharma practitioner, it's about 5 years of practice in a roughly 70, 75-year lifespan. 5 years. So is that going to be enough to take you through the doors of death? Will that be the thing that's coming up for you? Or will it be the last Netflix thing that you're streaming, that you watch again and again and again? Are those characters going to be coming up like that? Or if you're watching a disturbing film, you know, I saw this, I don't know if anybody saw this film. I mean, the actor was so amazing in it, but the film was one of the most disturbing films I've watched in a long time. I saw it on a plane coming back from England or wherever, I can't remember where I was, a film called Joker. And this is a film where I wouldn't recommend watching it even for the performance. He was amazing in it, but it so disturbed my mind because there's people like that living right now in the United States on the edge, mentally ill, that don't have the means. And one of the things I hold out hope for, and I'm not happy that a virus had to take us down to this, is that could our healthcare system in the United States be reorganized to benefit more beings other than just the rich? So it just kind of, for me, that movie ramped that up, of people that fall through the cracks. And as a result, I think sometimes violence ensues or other disturbing things for people. And we're all going to be paying for it. So nobody escapes from it, no matter how much you think you do. So be careful what you're watching, because it goes in there. But again, 5 years is not a long time to be practicing. Not a long time to be practicing. So these three reasonings under the main root, death is certain. Again, everybody dies, number one. You're every moment, like you got dropped out of an airplane without a parachute, you're a moment closer to death every moment. And number three, there's very little time for formal Dharma practice. Leads you to the resolution. I have to practice. I will practice. I'm going to get that together. Okay, let's go to the second root. Second main root we mentioned is the time of death is uncertain. Time of death is uncertain, has three reasonings under it. Once again, three reasonings. First reasoning, anybody remember the first reasoning? The time of death is uncertain. What do you remember about that? Anybody raise their hand that has any recollection of this? Okay, so oh wait, Anthony's got his finger up, please. Unmute there.
Yeah, life is, the expectancy of it is variable.
The life expectancy is?
Variable among people. Some people die very young. Some people die older.
Is that, whose microphone is that? Goodness. Okay. So people die. Yes. Thank you, Anthony. People die at any age in our world system. We don't have a fixed lifespan in our world system. That's number one. We don't have a fixed lifespan on planet Earth. And you know that. Look around. And I'm watching, and it's scary with the virus, because a lot of, in Pennsylvania, this is my state, in Pennsylvania right now, there's a big group of the 50 or people in their 50s seem to have a big percentage, and people in their 20s. A big percentage of them have the virus. Those are the biggest age groups right now in Pennsylvania, those two groups. So it doesn't matter. Now, I'm not saying they're dying of it. Younger people maybe have more resiliency, immune systems to be able to fight it off. But you don't know. People die at every age. People die at every age. There was something I read today of a baby died of the virus, unfortunately. So people are dying of this at every age right now. And with death, it affects any age. So we look at that. And you can reflect on the people that you know, the ages they were when they died. Colleen, I'm just curious, how old was your husband when he died? If you want to type that in. So people die at every age. You don't know. And we even be careful of your language, because our language will say, when I'm old, when we're old, we'll do this, right? You don't know if you'll live to be old. So I actually changed my language some time ago to say, if I live to be old, then maybe I'll do that. Or maybe we'll live I say, my sister and I joke about we'll live in the old age home together. We'll share a room in the nursing home, like that. Then the second and third points in this part are somewhat run together, the second and third points. The second point is that there's many more things contributing to your death than supporting your life. And the third one is the body is very fragile, very delicate. So the second point, there's many more things contributing to our death than supporting our life. Look at natural disasters. Now we have a new virus. And you know what? I'm sorry to tell you, there will always be some new disease popping up, right? We've seen that. We saw in the 70s and 80s, HIV sprang onto the scene and killed a lot of people. There's some dreadful things in Africa of filoviruses like Marburg disease and Ebola, extremely deadly. I mean, thank you that this virus mutates so that it doesn't kill its host. That's the nature of this virus. Doesn't kill the majority of people. Otherwise, it would be devastating for the planet, right? But there was SARS that popped onto the scene. There was another one called MERS. So there's always going to be something. Now, the difficulty with this virus is it's very easy to catch. And it was out there before people realized they had it. So that's one of the difficulties. Fortunately, the majority survive, but there'll be something else. There's lots of diseases, bacterias, viruses, cancers, infections that take people out. And then there's disasters and plane crashes and car crashes and food poisoning and freak accidents and all those kinds of things. So we're well aware of that. We hear about these strange things that happen to people and they die. That. The third reasoning under the time of death is uncertain, is that there are, the body is extremely delicate or fragile. So because in a car accident, the materials of the car and the velocity that you're traveling at is stronger, creates a force stronger than the body. So that's why we die in a car crash, crushes the body. The same in a plane crash or other vehicles like that. The body is delicate, so even something like food, but if it's tainted and spoiled, can create food poisoning. And if somebody's body is not strong enough to fight it off, sometimes people die from food poisoning. There was this thing going around, the flesh-eating bacteria, that oddly enough, I'm amazed that people get it at times in places that, like nice, clean places where we live, they get flesh-eating bacteria and die from that. So you just don't know how one infection, you go in the hospital for a minor procedure, a minor surgical procedure. And the next thing is you're then fighting for your life with hospital pneumonia on a ventilator. Like that. I had a cousin who went in to have benign colon polyps removed. He was fine. They found it in a colonoscopy. They had to be removed. They could turn into cancer, and he died on the operating table. So it happens to people all the time. So the body's very fragile. So these 3 points, that we lived with an unfixed lifespan, that there are many more things keeping us, causing our death than keeping us alive, and the body being very delicate leads us to a resolution that not only will I practice, I will practice now. So feeling that urgency, I can't wait any longer. Get to your practice today, do something today, like that. Something separate from a program like this. So this is great for you, a couple of hours, no problem, but see if you can then some people have been wanting to get that meditation place set up in their house. Well, there's no better time than right now because you're housebound for the most part. So really do it, clean out the closet. What better thing to do right now? You've got the time to do it. I'm going to clean out a drawer today. I have a drawer I've been waiting to get to. So that's one of the things I'm going to get to today. Here's number 3. This is the easiest part to realize. The second main heading is the hardest. The time of death is uncertain. We get that we're going to die, and we get that Dharma practice would be helpful, but we don't quite get the idea that my death is not going to come peacefully in old age. It's a harder point to realize. So this third main heading, the only thing that benefits you at the time of death is your Dharma practice. How's your mind? Okay. And this has 3 reasonings under it. The first reasoning is your possessions are of no help to you. And I would add position and possessions are of no help to you. Think about it. There are people actively dying, still grasping on to things. I don't want that thing to go to my son. I don't want her to get the pearls. What's happening to my house? What's going to happen to my house? Did they fix the thing? And I see people actively dying that are consumed with their things, and they can't take the things with them when they die. Concerned about their money, things like that. Your position as well can create agony at the time of death, identifying in a certain way that you had a certain posture on the planet, certain control over things, and that's not what's happening when you're actively dying. And some people really freak out in that space because they were so merged with their position in life and their identity around that. If you have a more fluid approach, that things change over time, like that, and that you realize that change is a constant in our lives, it can be very helpful, like that, to loosen things up. So the second thing that we hang on to, and the second reasoning under this, how are your family and friends? Are they of help to you, your family and friends? And is there a way we can open up our microphones? How are your family and friends? To just get a little input from you. What do you think about family and friends, those of you that would like to say something? Are they going to help you at the time of death? Go for it. Yeah. Beth.
I think a lot more people who are unfamiliar, uncomfortable with that, almost fuel more uncertainty. So unless there's somebody that I think you have the same spiritual practice with, I think it's almost better to not let people know. It's kind of like not inviting more worry.
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. So, it definitely, people can be around you grasping on, crying over you. What's that going to be like when you're dying? Right? Begging you not to die. Go for it, Madeline. Wait, is this the Madeline that I know? I can't see your picture, but you had your hand up. Please go for it. If you want to unmute your mic.
Oh, there we go. Am I here?
Yeah, you're there. Great.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a camera.
Okay.
I was going to say that I just, like, as far as people go that we have in our life, like, I try to keep it consistent and, like, remember that fluid motion throughout life. And then I try to just act with compassion. And I find that the people that conglomerate around me, the people that I have in my life, are the people that care about me more than anybody else. And so that gives me a certain degree of not just comfort, but it gives me a certain degree of, like, I have people who care about me, and that gives me, like, peace of mind, I guess.
Okay.
And so when I look forward, I think about dying as, like, I'm saving up my bank, and once I get to the end of the road, I get to just let it all go, and I look forward to that.
Uh-huh.
And so that kind of that helps me to kind of go through life not worrying about the shit that doesn't really matter too much. Excuse me.
Yes.
Anyways, that's all I got.
Yes, thank you. So, and as far as the people around you at helping you at the time of death, would you say? Because they're going to be the people that you're connected to, right?
I would hope so, yeah. I would hope that they would help me without being attached to me.
Okay. Yeah.
which is how it seems people operate on a regular level, because I try to maintain my boundaries, and so people understand that, and so people are like, okay, she's a certain way, but I care about her very much, but I understand where she's coming from, and I got to give her space. And so I'm confident that when it comes time for death, that I will have people who care about me, who will be there to help me through it, while also giving me the boundaries that I need to fully experience that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me, okay. Thank you very much, Madeline. I would agree. It's like, check out who you feel is going to support you. Okay. Because some friends and family, if they know your spiritual life, if they know your practice, we've done vigils around people's beds, knowing their practice, some of it recommended by Lama Zopa Rinpoche to do this practice for them. That is a comfort for people. If you're a Dharma practitioner, that's the kind of thing I wouldn't mind to have around me. Okay, but a lot of people around you don't know that, and they don't know what to do, right? And they're going to be doing from their tradition, which may not be your tradition. So generally, when I come in sometimes for last rites, in a sense, in a Buddhist way, for people, and I always, when a family asks, the family's often not Buddhist, and I just ask the family kind of what level they would like to participate, or how long do they want me there. Sometimes they just want a 10-minute something, and sometimes they want a full-on medicine Buddha puja, and we'll be there for an hour or longer, and they're happy to participate as well. So make sure that you've got to make sure, but that you have the right people around you, and you have instructions for them clearly what you'd like when you're well enough to let them know that, because sometimes family and friends are not being helpful. So that's where one of these, it would be like, that's not really what's going to most benefit you if they're not aware of what you want and what your practice is. And let me just take a few other, there was some comments. Okay, so we've got Patty is with her mom in Oklahoma, and those oxygen tanks can be very loud. Okay, so Patty got the 5 wishes, which I'm going to talk about later. And she's instructed only people allowed with her are Buddhists or those who are positive. So she doesn't want crying around her. She said, read the King of Prayers. There's a lot of other practices people can do for you, Patty, if you're interested. So there's something in this document, okay, 5 wishes. And if you look at on the cover, what the wishes are, and I'll read them. This is a legal document. It's available in all of our states for the most part. It's wishes for, number 1, the person I want to make care decisions for me when I can't. Number 2, the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want. Number 3, how comfortable I want to be. Number 4, how I want people to treat me. And my wish for what I want my loved ones to know. And it has very specific things in there. We can talk a little bit more about that later. So Patty's gotten it and wrote down in there, and then you can get it, I think, notarized, or you can put it with your regular will. This is like a living will, and you can formalize all of it and make it legal. And then what I would suggest is make 2 or 3 copies of all of those documents and give them to 2 or 3 of your main closest people that you feel will honor your wishes. This doesn't mean it's the closest person to you, but it's somebody you know who's responsible. Number 1, they're going to remember where they put the document. There's somebody close to me that I would love to hand this off to, and I will, but I have to have 2 other people because he's not going to remember where he put the document, most probably. So make sure they're reliable people, and make sure that they're willing, if they're a distance from you, that they're willing to travel to get to you. to make sure these things are taken care of. And you can be very specific in the pages. So Martha's added, her husband was 41 when her husband died. And when his daughters entered the room, he felt agitated. So she decided not to enter the room anymore so he could let go. So this is another thing that's very challenging for people. If somebody is very attached to you, do you want to be in the room? What about, and there's people that beat themselves up. So please try not to do this if you've done this in the past, or you're in the hospital with someone actively dying and you're there all day long with them. And when you decide to go to the cafeteria to get coffee, they pass away. A lot of times people were waiting for you to leave the room. They may be in a coma, but due to their attachment to you, and a lot of people are happy to just pass on their own. And I wouldn't beat yourself up that they were alone and they were alone like that. Sometimes they're waiting like that. And here people are saying his mother gave a copy. Yeah, you can give a copy of these papers to your lawyer. You can also register them with your local hospital. Hospitals have those things on file now and they'll immediately bring it up. Do you have a DNR, do not resuscitate order? And it's all there in the hospital thing. So you don't have to worry. A friend of mine, his mother couldn't breathe. She went into respiratory distress some years ago. He rushed her to the hospital that was 45 minutes drive away. The mother didn't want to be on a respirator, but she did agree to go to the hospital. When he got to the hospital, they immediately are there to save her life. So they started talking about intubating and all that, and she didn't want it, but she couldn't speak. So because he didn't have the papers with him, he had to go back home and come back to the hospital. An hour and a half later, he turned back up at the hospital and she is on a respirator and trying to pull it out of her mouth. So you don't want, so that way if you register the papers with some local hospitals, then generally it can be taken care of. So, and Lama, I'll get to you in one sec. She's got her hand up. I just want to mention, so this last point, do friends and family help you? Consider that by considering, do I have my papers together? Have I been clear with them what I want? Have I given them written wishes? We're all clear. Have I done it with the hospital, with my lawyer, with someone else? And have I specified the boundaries that I don't want this or that in the room, or I do want this, like that? If you have a particularly highly realized teacher, a guru or something, the best would be to make sure that's in your wishes, that that person's contacted when you're dying, when you're in distress, when you know that, so those people know if you can't communicate and you have an accident and suddenly you can't communicate, they can access that, contact that person, and that person, for me, in my case, someone like Lama Zopa Rinpoche would be contacted to advise what would be the best thing to do for me. And he's done that for a lot of his disciples, like that. Yeah, and so Madeline saying about praying for her grandfather and was distracted by something, and in that time he passed away. I mean, that happens. Don't beat yourself up. Don't beat yourself up. I mean, it's very hard for us not to be distracted. It's very hard for us not to be distracted. We do the best that we can. Lamo, do you want to unmute your mic? And
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. My question is to the last subject, that since we've come to reason that we can die at any time, any second, we don't know where, we don't know how. So would that statement from the time we're born, we're actually leading towards death? Even as a baby, we might not cognize it, but if it's good for me at this age, it should have been. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, yeah, if death can happen at any time,
Right.
this was taught, which I think the Tibetans, maybe 2-year-old can't conceive of that. But whenever a sentient being is born, we as humans can cognize death at a certain age. So then instead of the way I've looked at it and how I stay like grateful or compassionate is that it's not for everything I do in this life is for the next one because I can die at any time.
So sorry, I'm not clear on the question. Sorry.
The question is, we were talking about leading up to our lives, what we do while we're living
Yep.
to end up dying. I've always looked at it that, not in a morbid way, but while we're so-called, quote, living, we're actually going more towards death. I think the delusion or delusion is we think we're living and then we're going to be actively dying.
Right.
If we don't know when we're going to die, where we're going to die, how we're going to die, couldn't it or wouldn't one can say that we're actively living and dying at the same time?
Well, in a sense we are, but I don't really I think active dying is different, where everything's really, you're leaving the living world and you're not really able to function as much. So I think I make a distinction personally. I think it's slightly different in that we are more among the living when you're functioning, but if you keep the death awareness
Right.
in your mind, I think that can be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, because for a very long time now, because of certain circumstances, I was told, you're going to die.
Right.
Could be
Yep.
tomorrow, could be tonight.
Yep.
So that's when I thought of
Sure.
it.
And some people, I would say there's some people, I know a number of people that had a cancer diagnosis when they were young or
Right.
recently or 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and some kind of chronic illness that looked like it was going to kill them, but it didn't. And so they got this slice of, they actually thought they were going to die quite soon and they didn't. So in some ways they get this heightened awareness, which can be very beneficial. Use it and roll it into your practice and let it ignite your practice like that. So thank you. Let me go on a little bit here. And then we're going to do a meditation on impermanence. I want to do a meditation on impermanence, but let me just take a couple last messages. How can we better help our loved ones who are facing the loss of death? So there's many ways. Thank you, Lauren. Whoops. So how to help loved ones is, first of all, to figure out what is their practice. Do they have a spiritual inclination? Some people don't. But if it's a loved one, somebody you know very well, then you know a lot more about them. Like, for instance, there's people I know close to me, they don't like a lot of talking in general. So I'm not going to be babbling away in their hospital room when they're dying or their hospice room. There's some people that want everybody around them that really don't want to be alone. So that's a way, maybe you set up kind of round the clock vigils for somebody that's terrified of being alone or waking up in the middle of the night because they know they're dying soon and they're terrified. So that could be helpful. Each person's very individual. So the best is to find out, and can you have a frank talk with a loved one to make sure you know what they want, but you have to have that conversation at the appropriate time, in the appropriate way. And I'll give an example is, my mom didn't want to talk about death ever. She was really terrified of it and didn't want to hear about it. And so years later, I really wanted to know what her wishes were, and she didn't have anything in writing. She didn't have a living will or anything. So when my grandmother died, very, very old at the age of 99, and we were all involved, my mother and myself and my brother particularly involved in daily phone calls for several weeks as she was kind of slowly winding down to make decisions. And the decisions, we knew what her wishes were because she very expressly told us, like when she was well and alive, like we knew what her wishes were. So as her body was slowly, naturally shutting down, there were decisions to be made about a respirator and about a feeding tube and about oxygen and about antibiotics. And we knew based on her wishes exactly what to do because she had expressed. So for my mom and us, it was very easy to make these decisions because we knew what the wishes were. So after she passed, at a very appropriate time, my mom and I were having a nice little quiet conversation one day, but it was about my grandmother and missing her. And then I said, but you know what was helpful is that she told us what she wanted. And she was really clear. And then when the doctors asked us questions, we knew exactly what to do. And I said, that's why I kind of would like to know what you want. And then right then she just told me exactly what she wanted. Like she totally got it. So have that conversation to make sure you know if you're faced with issues of extending life, like a feeding tube and a respirator, make sure you've had that conversation first, because otherwise you're guessing, and that becomes more painful, I find, for the children or the person caring for the loved one when you're guessing and you don't know. Is this what he would have wanted? You know, things like that. And then I would just say to make them as comfortable and as stress-free as possible. Okay, and one example I gave recently, when my dad passed last summer, he, in the kind of cancer that he had, they said at some point he may experience some hallucinations. Okay, he didn't have dementia, even though he was in his 90s. His mind was really good, but he did have some hallucinations. And one of them, at one point, he piped up to my brother that he said, we need to move the truck. Very agitated. We need to move the truck. We need to move the truck. And we don't have a truck in the family, but my father's father, my grandfather, had a moving truck. And somehow this is what came up in the hallucinations. And my brother focused on it. And he said, you know, to my father, we're all sitting in the room, you know, do you mean the Dodge? Like, we couldn't think of any truck. And my father said, yeah, we need to move it. They're going to tow it. They're going to tow it where it's parked. And my brother said, Dad, you sold that truck in the 50s. He said, you sold that truck before I was born. It's like, so my father got very agitated. And he started arguing with my brother. And my brother was insisting that we didn't have the truck and the truck was sold. And I just saw the agitation, and I, you know, had a moment to think about it. And I realized I'm going to venture into the non-virtue of lying. I took responsibility for it, right? I knew it would create some non-virtuous imprint in my mind, but my motivation was really good to stop my father's agitation, to settle his mind. And I picked up my keys my car keys were on his hospital table in the middle of the room. And I picked them up and held them up and said, Dad, I'm going to go move the truck. I'll go move it. And he looked up and fortunately he knew I had the confidence to drive a truck for some reason. I don't know, you know, but he accepted that. And I said, and he said, where are you going to put it? I said, I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'm going to go move the truck. Don't worry about it. And I left the room for 15 minutes. I came back in the room and figured I'm not going to mention the truck unless he brings it up. But of course, the first thing he said was, you know, what did you do with the truck? Amazing, right? And then I said, oh, you wouldn't believe, but there is a big garage on the other side of the property. And they let me put it there, and it's very protected, and it's part of your plan. It's free, right? To which he just like sat back with this normal delight that he has, and he just said, that's terrific. Like, ease their pain, ease their discomfort. You know, I knew I was lying. I didn't really want to lie, but I weighed it over having him be distressed about the truck. Now, my father, who was an engineer, Mr. Tech Savvy, immediately comes back to me after he says, "That's terrific," comes back to me with, "Can you take a photo of it? I want to see where it is." Unbelievable, right? So fortunately I said, "Oh, it's on the other side of the property. It's really far. You know, I'll do it tomorrow. Don't worry." And he goes, "Oh, okay, okay." And fortunately, tomorrow, the next day, he only brought it up a little bit and didn't focus on, we were able to kind of get out of that conversation pretty quickly. And that was the end of the truck. So I think any way you can make them comfortable, I would be honest with them about what's happening. We were really honest with my father about what treatment was left and when there was no treatment left and what we could do to make him comfortable. He was very involved in his treatment and we tried to keep him involved the whole time. And so I think to alleviate any pain or suffering physically, you can do that as well. There are things to do. I think it's brilliant to get hospice involved. If somebody has a slow lingering death, old age, cancer, chronic illness, get hospice involved because they're really specially trained to support not only your loved one passing away, but yourself. Can be really, really helpful. And there's many more things I can add at the end as well. So yes, so there's some other comments. So what I'd like to do right now is we're going to do a brief meditation on impermanence, which I found would be a little more beneficial than just going through the 9 points right now, because we forget that everything changes. Let's just get in touch with this a little bit. So just find a comfortable position. And slowly, as you allow yourself to get comfortable in that position, just close your eyes. Let the mind settle on the breath for a moment. I'd like you to notice right now the changing nature of your body on the level that you can experience. So for instance, we're not looking at a subtle level, we're looking at a grosser level. You might notice your respiration, just the air going in and out as your lungs kind of expand and contract. You might notice that. You might notice that you have an itch somewhere in your body or a rumbling in your stomach. Any sensation in your body right now, I'd just like you to notice the changing nature of that. And then I'd like you to consider the more subtle changes going on in your body right now. So for instance, cells are replicating. We're not aware of that. Blood is coursing through the veins, the arteries. You may not even be aware of your heart pumping. Just get in touch right now of all the changing nature of the subtle experiences in your body right now. And what about your mind? Notice the changes going on in your mind right now. Thoughts passing through, ideas popping up, a memory. Notice the changing nature of your mind. So get that sense of the body and mind ever changing. None of it is stationary and just standing still. You may not notice subtle changes of your body every day. But if you look at a photograph of yourself 10 years ago, clearly something has been changing. We forget this. We deny it in our effort to ignore our deaths. And some people mourn it as they go into old age and lose control over parts of their bodies or manifest certain illnesses. This is a natural course of living. Everything changes. Let's just step outside of our body and mind for a moment. Right now, your home or the room you're sitting in, it may feel like it's not changing. There's a solid floor on which you're able to stand or sit or put furniture. The walls, in a way to support the roof, they seem pretty solid. And all the other components of your house, physicists know all of those components are made up of molecules moving in a certain configuration. Just get in touch with that changing nature of the room in which you sit, the house in which you live right now, of its changing nature. Step outside the walls of your home right now to the outside reality. For a lot of us right now, spring is coming. Think about the changing nature of that. There's birds all around the outside of my house now making nests, flitting around. Grass is growing again. The trees are about to pop with their little light green leaves. Things are growing. Occasionally a car goes by. And I know there's a bigger roadway beyond where there's more cars. Just think about that changing nature of that external landscape right now. Even a roadway or a bridge that seems very solid. Explore its changing nature. Everything changes. So the more we can accept this natural state of life's experience, the more peaceful our minds, the more fluid our existence is, realizing that everything changes. Return your awareness to your breath again. Just note that changing nature. Every time you breathe in different oxygen molecules. Every time you exhale, it's the same, exhaling different molecules. We breathe in a different amount. Slowly, please relax. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. When we got to the last part that of the 9-point death meditation, I'm sorry, I forgot to finish. Family and friends are of no help unless, as we discussed, they know your practice, they are happy to help you with that and keep a peaceful, calm environment around you and help to support the work you need to do in the dying experience. So then we come to the 9th point, which is the third under the third main heading, is that your body is of no help when you're dying. It's often the body that is unable to support the life anymore, okay? But what they actually say when you are dying, Tibetan Buddhism says, because everything comes from the mind, it's when the karmic seeds that are supporting this life run out, which are contained in the subtle consciousness, most subtle mind, when those seeds no longer can support this life, you die. So sometimes an external reason will manifest. You get cancer. You're fighting an illness. There's a car accident. But a couple of times I've seen somebody in, like somebody 50. We lost a nun at one of our centers. She was 50 years old. This was several years ago. And they had to do an autopsy. The officials said they weren't sure, and they decided they wanted to do an autopsy, and they found no cause of death for her. There was no heart attack, no aneurysm, nothing. She hadn't been in bad health, and the caretaker of the center had found her. And so obviously the seeds in her consciousness no longer supporting that life, and you pass away. And sometimes people die, like there's no reason, and somehow something suddenly quick, or some illness quickly manifests, and like that. So there are these subtle images people get when the life is finishing, but these are visions we have normally in our normal life, but they're so subtle. Our minds are not subtle enough. We don't catch the visions, internal visions that happen. Okay. And they happen with kind of mini deaths. For instance, a major sneeze or yawn is almost like, it almost stops the heart for a moment, right? So when you go to sleep at night, because the mind becomes more subtle, right? So these visions appear then, and they appear in reverse when we wake up in the morning. These are the different visions that manifest as, and so they will happen when you're actively dying. We normally do them and meditate on them in tantric practices. Okay, but I can go over these with you at this level. If you haven't had a tantric initiation, that's okay. But what happens is when you're actively dying, the first thing that happens is our body's supported by various elements of the planet, like earth, fire, water, air, like that. When the earth element dissolves, that's kind of, our body starts to lose its power, because the earth is associated with our form, our body, okay? So we start to lose our power, the body becomes thin, the limbs feel loose, okay? This aggregate of form, so mental aggregates are also absorbing, but the aggregate of form, that is the body, not the mental aggregates, absorbs. And also there's different wisdoms that start dissolving, and this is the mirror-like wisdom dissolves. Sight becomes unclear and dark. Normally your eye sense consciousness starts finishing. You might not be able to open or close your eyes at this point. And this could be an active phase of dying before the respiration actually stops. But there's an internal sign that appears to the consciousness, which is a mirage-like image. It's not separate from your mind. It is your mind's total experience. A mirage-like image, like you're looking out on a hot highway and you see those wavering, those waves of heat kind of rising, that mirage-like image, almost like water. When you see water off in the distance on a roadway. So it could be a mirage-like image of water around you. Could be a first indication that death is coming soon, okay? Now again, these are visions we have when we fall asleep at night, but do you recognize them? Probably not. Why? Because we're not familiar with them. We don't do enough meditation on them, okay? So that's the first, earth element dissolves. The second thing is the water element starts dissolving. Okay? And this is where the fluids in the body start drying up. And the aggregate of feeling, this is the first mental aggregate, dissolves. Feeling is simply pain, pleasure, or neutral. That starts dissolving. So the body consciousness no longer can differentiate between those feelings of pain, pleasure, and neutral. The basic wisdom of equality, our ordinary consciousness, mindful of pleasure, pain, and neutral feelings, dissolves. And the ear sense, you start losing hearing, ability to hear, which is one of the last things to go when we're dying, actively dying. People can often hear for a long degree. The internal sign you will have is an appearance of smoke, like being in a smoke-filled room, a blue-gray smoke. This is not separate from your mind. This is your mind. This is your whole experience. The next thing is the fire element dissolves, and this is where heat starts to draw from the extremities, from the top part of your body to the heart, from the lower part of your body to your heart. Digestion ceases. The aggregate of discrimination dissolves. So you're no longer mindful of any beings around you, if that was still functioning. basic wisdom of analysis dissolves. You no longer can remember the names of close persons like that if the breathing's still happening. The inhalation becomes extremely weak with the exhalation stronger. And the internal signs is an appearance of fireflies in the night sky or sparks over a bonfire. That's your entire experience. The wind element dissolves. This is usually when the respiration ceases. And the winds begin from the upper portions, everything from the lower portions moving to the heart center. And the aggregate of compositional factors absorbs, so you cannot perform any physical actions, things like that. Basic wisdom of achieving activities dissolves. The tongue becomes thick and short. The root of the tongue becomes bluish black. And the internal sign is an appearance of a candle, the glow around a candle before it's about to go out. And that's your entire experience. Then you have more subtle dissolutions now of these next 4 phases. The 5th to the 8th signs of dissolution, when the aggregate of consciousness absorbs and the 80 conceptions start dissolving. The winds in the right and left channels, this is your subtle energy system, start to amass to be able to enter the central channel. Okay, so you've got winds in the right and left channels above the heart, enter the central channel at the top of the head, right here. And the internal sign you have here is what's called a clear, like a harvest moon over an empty field, like a milky white glow, or what they call a white appearance. And that's your entire experience. This is not the clear light yet, but this is like a milky harvest moon is as far as this white appearance. The next subtle experience, as the mind of white appearance dissolves, the winds in the right and left channels below the heart start to enter the central channel at the base of the spine. Again, this is your subtle energy system, and you're filled with your internal vision is what's called a red appearance, a red increase, and it's like a brilliant magenta, orange, red sunset. That's your whole experience. So you have the winds from the top moving down to the heart center, entering the central channel here. The winds from the base of coming from the base of the spine up to the heart center. The next vision, as the red increase dissolves, the upper and lower winds gather at the heart now. These are subtle winds, gather at the heart and enter the central channel through the drop, an indestructible drop at the heart. And the internal sign here is what's called a black near attainment. And the reason it's a near attainment is you've nearly reached the clear light. And basically it's like an unconscious faint at this point. Some people doing the meditation well may faint at this point because they're not absolutely able to control it yet. And then as the mind of this black near attainment dissolves, the clear light of death dawns. So this would be an active dying. All the winds dissolve into the very subtle life-bearing wind in the indestructible drop at the heart. Through highest yoga tantra practice, this is something we're trying to actualize. And then these visions will arise automatically. But while you're alive, and you can control them. They do not cause your death. They're just visions that also come up at the dying time. So what we're trying to do, and at this point you have a very clear mind of clear light. I don't know what it looks like, but I would imagine the most radiant, pure experience of your mind in its most subtle experience as you bring the winds into the central channel in this way, in the correct way, okay? So what you try to do is focus on this clear light at death as long as you can. You can also practice and do it in life, where you imagine this clear light by going through the subtle visions, focusing slowly on each one. But at the death time, you're not encumbered by the body anymore. So for great meditators who familiarize their minds with this practice in life, they're able to stay focused on the clear light of death, the mind in its most subtle experience, and then they're able to meditate on emptiness at that time to actualize more highly realized states. And that's how we get enlightened to some degree. That's part of the path to enlightenment. Now, once again, these visions do occur when you fall asleep every night. So if we're not used to recognizing them, it helps doing the meditation. Or one day, if you're able to get highest yoga tantra empowerment, then you can do these a little bit more readily. They're readily available in many of the practices that we do. And then when you're taking rebirth, those visions reverse, okay, until basically the conception occurs at that point, when you find the next rebirth like that. So I just wanted to explain that as far as some of the subtle experiences that can happen. And now what happens is, for instance, when you have sexual orgasm, the visions are also there during that time, okay? The reason it's very, very blissful, okay? The reason sometimes a really big sneeze or a big yawn feels blissful. Sometimes falling asleep, there's a blissful energy before that, okay? But the reason, especially sexual orgasm, that is the winds get close to entering the central channel, but they don't do it in the proper way. That's blissful. Can you imagine if you get the winds in the right way? If we train our minds through tantric empowerment first, and then tantric practice, what do we need before tantric empowerment? We need to have a good fundamental understanding of our basic philosophy, the Lam Rim. So if we can build on that, okay, by learning the 9 steps of the 9-point death meditation, right? And then slowly, then one day we may be good vessels to take tantric empowerment with a qualified teacher, and then be able to do some of those practices steadily through our lives, so that that's what will be there supporting us at the death time. I'm going to just do a couple more things, and then I'm going to take some questions. Okay. Organ donation. I want to talk about some other practical things. Organ donation. Okay, here's a question. What's the difference between the wisdom and the aggregate dissolving during the 3rd stage? From Anthony. Okay, which wisdom are you talking, which aggregate are you talking about, Anthony? If you can, because the aggregate is, what we have is 5 aggregates, 1 form, which is the body, and then 4 mental aggregates, okay? And also we've got different discriminating wisdoms that are associated. So we're trying to build wisdoms that basically counter 5 delusions, 5 main delusions in our minds. So the wisdoms are separate from the aggregates. Oh, aggregated discrimination. Okay, this is when the fire element dissolves. The aggregated discrimination absorbs, and you're no longer mindful of affairs, of people, close persons like that. The basic wisdom of analysis is similar to the aggregated discrimination at this point, and you no longer remember the names of close beings. So they're somewhat similar. I don't really know what the difference would be between those, to answer your question. So, and I would say maybe the wisdom would be contained in that particular wisdom would be contained in that mental aggregate of discrimination, but particularly when that mental aggregate of discrimination no longer experiences any delusion, if that makes sense. Okay. So let me go into some practical other things that people ask about. Organ donation. Is that beneficial to do or not? It's a personal decision. Buddhism doesn't have necessarily a good or bad about it. It's a personal, individual decision. What we might do is, they say, if you're a great meditator, you may opt not to donate organs, And basically because they do need to take the organs right away, and that could a little bit hinder how the subtle mind is dealing with the subtle wind in the body. It's going to interrupt the subtle wind in the body. And so could that affect how the mind leaves, how they basically leave, the consciousness leaves the body? Some great meditators say that could affect, so they would opt not to donate organs. But if you have the wish that to really help beings, and organ donation really does benefit a lot of beings, it can, like that, it can be very beneficial if you have that huge, wonderful motivation to do it. So it is an individual decision. Does organ donation, here's a question, accelerate the death process? I think it could accelerate the death process based on them taking the organs right away. Your consciousness leaves the body regardless, but do you want more time to meditate, or are you doing a subtle meditation and they come in and interrupt that meditation? I think it could happen. I've heard that before. Let's talk about euthanasia. Tibetan Buddhists do not euthanize, not even their pets, I'm afraid to tell you. This is hard for people. The reason is, unless you know the mind of the being, you don't know what you're interrupting. I know that it's very painful to watch our dogs and cats go through cancer and tremendous illness and old age with a lot of suffering. And it's easier to take them to the vet and get the shot and let them release like that. But you don't know whether it's better for them to finish out the doggy life for 3 more weeks. Okay, you can make them comfortable during this process. You can play mantras for them. You can recite prayers to them. You can take them around shrines like stupas. We've done all kinds of things for our animals. Sometimes the veterinary community finds that harsh and torturous. But I've gotten sleeping pills for animals. I've gotten pain killers for animals. I've divided up human ones for animals and made the animal still, I didn't kill them with the medication, but basically made them comfortable, like palliative care or hospice care for animals. We do it for humans. Why not for animals? Let them live out, finish off that lower rebirth. Maybe they end up just a few more weeks in it and take a human rebirth, and we don't get the killing karma. Now, granted, it's a mixed karma, like me lying to my father. You have every wish to end the suffering of your pet. There's no question that you love your pet. And the last thing you ever want to do is harm them. So that's your motivation, which colors the outcome of taking them to the vet to give them a shot that kills them. But we can't even discuss it. We call it putting them to sleep. Really? Right? We're euthanizing them. So again, if you feel you can manage, it's an individual decision again. I've done this with many animals, making them comfortable, getting the right medications I needed, administering the medications where they could get some rest. They could not be in pain, not yelping in pain, until they naturally passed away, like that. So we certainly don't euthanize people. Again, that would be an individual decision. If you are feeling to end your life, let's say you have a chronic illness, Tibetan Buddhists still would not do it, because somebody may have to administer the medicine to you, which would be causing your death. I wouldn't want to put anyone in that situation for myself. You might administer it yourself, then it's a form of suicide in a way that doesn't create positive karma for you. Certainly the motivation is understandable. Changes can change the outcome like that, but we would try not to go there to suicide or anything like that. It is very helpful when you've lost a loved one is to get grief counseling and to understand that grief is a normal passage of death, of any type of death, whether it's your pet, whether it's your parent, a partner. You are going to have a passage of grief. The average time, they say, even though it's very hard to put a time limit on it, is basically a 2-year cycle for the loss of an elderly parent or somebody from a long suffering disease. So the grief you will experience as a survivor is a normal 2-year cycle. However, with the death of a child or a premature death, a sudden death, a tragic death, the cycle can be longer, but it's important to know that the grief ends, that you are not being held hostage, being a victim to the grief for the rest of your life, which some people do. Use your life, please, in a meaningful way. You can give back, for instance, to people who recently lost a child, if you lost a child 10 years ago. There's support groups like that, people losing spouses suddenly. People, there's support groups you can join. And after a few years, when you've come through the grief, you can then give back to the people that are just entering the support group for the first time, completely shattered, like that. So know that the grief does end. What are other practices that we do that can be incredibly helpful? We recite mantras. We do medicine Buddha practice is one of the main ones we do when somebody is dying or when they're ill, like that. Lama Zopa Rinpoche has given us a huge array of practices. We started a practice session. The first one was yesterday, hosted by Shanti Deva Center, and it was fantastic. So it took about 45 minutes, but starts at 1 p.m. and the next one we're doing is April 1st. So if you're interested, you can find all of the info and the practices. Let me see if I can just put this up for everybody. Everything is there. And I'll actually try to give you let me see if I can give you a more specific part of their website. Here we go. There we go. So if you're interested, the next one, it's Wednesdays and Saturdays. We've scheduled 4 to start. We have 3 more left. We're going to see if it's beneficial for people. The practices can be found there. It is recorded if you can't make it at that time. There's one right now on my Facebook feed. If you go to my website and click on the Facebook link in the upper left, I think it's there, and it might be on my YouTube page as well, which is also in the upper left. So you can find it there, and you can find other schedules if you're interested of things I'm doing online at my website. I just posted. I can't recommend enough to try to do these practices that Rinpoche is recommending. We have a highly realized being that's saying this is the best thing to do for yourself and for the planet. And it includes 2 mantras. One is called Vajra Armor, and one is called Black Manjushri. Manjushri is the Buddha of infinite wisdom. He comes in many forms. These happen to be mantras. I know initially they're long to do, they're difficult to do, but during the practice session, we also get you the kind of pronunciation way of doing it. You try your best. If you do it with a lot of faith, and slowly, quite quickly, you can learn the mantra and memorize it, and then you can focus a little bit more on the visualization that's explained in the practices. These are fantastic practices to do anyway if you are suffering from a serious illness. Hugely helpful. So this is a way to prevent yourself from getting the virus. And then there's also these other practices that Rinpoche has recommended that we do, some of them including the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra, the mantra of the Buddha of compassion. So that's included. If you can recite some of that, hugely helpful for life in general, like that, helping you build more compassion. So that's a little bit of what I wanted to say today, and because we've got a short time, but I want to ask right now, are there any questions? You can either raise your hand in the chat. There's actually a thing that says you can raise your hand. You can raise your hand on camera. Okay, I guess we're doing okay then. Okay, great. So let me just add a little bit more then. I just want to talk about, somebody asked, again, how do I help family? What are some of the best practices to cope with grief? What I would do is I find all my Buddhist practices help me cope with grief, because I feel like I'm getting my mind prepared. And I'm doing either practices my teachers recommended that I do, practices that have felt to keep my mind balanced, calm. So I find having a rich, consistent meditation and Dharma practice is one of the best things to do for grief. And I would say Medicine Buddha probably is another one like that. Okay, a way to purify euthanizing a pet. Okay, so if you've euthanized a pet, which many people have, please do not beat yourself up. Okay, you had every best intention for your pet and probably during its life took very, very good care of your pet. So a wonderful connection and a wonderful thing that you did. Vajrasattva practice is a great purifier. So if you're not familiar with that, do check in with Thupten Khunga Center. You can ask them like that of how to do Vajrasattva practice. I'm sure it's on the internet. There's some on my website. If you go into the watch or the listen tabs and you go down, you'll see there's a Vajrasattva practice, a program I did at one of our French centers, but it's in English as well. So you could go through that practice, would be really helpful to learn. That's a practice I do every evening to purify. Any kind of purification practice is helpful with you keeping in mind you want to purify euthanizing your pet. Making prostrations to the 35 Buddhas could be enormously helpful. It's another purification practice. One last thing before we separate as well, we will do a dedication before we end, is I wanted to mention about, please, if you can, to make donations to Thupten Khunga Center. They're providing this format for us. They're setting it up. Thank you to Nicole, Rebecca, all the people that made this possible, Thupten Khunga. Thank you to all of you for showing up. We're hoping to do more of these as well. Nicole's contacted me about that. So if you can and you realize you're not really driving as much, I always mention that, as much as you would be, and it costs 20 to 30 bucks to fill up your car or more, maybe that's a donation you can make to Thupten Khunga Center. Nicole, do you want to put the link up for people if they can make a donation? I so appreciate it. I don't need the offerings now. Give it to the center. Our centers are struggling because they're closed. I think, and also please, you can attend Venerable Tendrin's classes online. Thupten Khunga Center's done a great job setting things up online. So looking forward to being back in the future. I've really enjoyed, this was actually the end today of a program I was supposed to be there in person. So I'm so glad that we could do it this way. And what I'd like to do is, I would really like to dedicate the merit now in closing. Yeah, especially people that live a distance from a center. This is the way we're reaching all these people right now. I'm so happy. So I'd like to dedicate right now, and I'm going to pull up and just read a dedication that is from one of Rinpoche's practices that Rinpoche's given us to do for the virus. So please look at that site for the New York Center. It's connected to our FPMT site that Thupten Khunga can also give to you. These are practices Rinpoche's recommended. There's an 1.5-hour video of Rinpoche giving us the oral transmissions of these practices, and it's a wonderful video to watch. And Rinpoche has a new video out about dying that just came out. So if you're on an FPMT, you can sign up for the listserv. You will get these announcements every day. So let me just read this dedication. Let's see if I can find the right one. No. Okay, I think it's in this one. Actually, I'm just going to read this prayer in closing. That was one of this is the one, a request to pacify the fear of famine, that is part of our practices requested to do. Having generated the mind, aspiring to the highest supreme enlightenment, in order to truly liberate all infinite living beings, you, the compassionate victorious one, completed the 2 accumulations. The assemblies of guiding Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, hearers, Pratyeka Buddhas, Gurus, Yidams, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians of the 10 directions, Yaksha wealth gods, the lords of treasures, along with your retinues, Think of these protectorless living beings of the degenerate times with love. And then in order to truly protect these embodied beings who are tormented by the sufferings of hunger, thirst, and poverty, let fall a rain of whatever attractive enjoyments are needed, jewels, food, wealth, grains, bedding, and so forth, on this world's land of snows. Please pacify the harm of the four elements, untimely wind, fire, drought, rain, floods, and so forth, and may nourishing grains from crops, harvests, and so forth ripen and increase like they do during the age of completion. By the force of having made extensive requests with strong entreaties through the force of love and compassion, may the eon of sickness, fighting, and famine be pacified, and may we possess a happy, long life free from illness. Through the great compassion of the victorious ones and their children, and the force of the infallible truth of cause and effect, may the teachings of the victorious ones spread and increase, and may all living beings swiftly attain the highest enlightenment. So you see how short? That's one of the prayers. It's very short. It really takes about a half an hour to do these prayers. So have a look at that. And I wanted to mention, I am giving a talk today from 1:30 to 3. It's our connected to our San Francisco Center. I'm just trying to see if I can find, it's on their it's a Facebook Live. It's not a Zoom talk. I'm just trying to see if I can find a link to it. And it's about to calm the mind. Yeah, I can't seem to find it right now. Let's see if I can. Okay, hang on a second. See if I can bring this up. Okay, I think this may connect you, or you can go to their, oh, thank you, Don. Don got it. Okay, there you go. So there's the link. And I'd like to dedicate to Tom Carr, a colleague dying of the virus right now. I'm so sorry. And can I get, I'm sorry, the woman in the beginning, her husband, she mentioned, what is his name? If you want to post that, I didn't get his name, but let's dedicate please to Tom Carr, and anyone dying of this virus right now, may they be healed of the virus instantly. May a cure, a vaccine be found and developed quickly for everyone. May the spread of the virus stop instantly. And if people are dying, may they immediately take a good rebirth where they can quickly become enlightened and work perfectly for all others. And may we dedicate to the long lives of our precious teachers. And Donna Sherbondy of pancreatic cancer, let's dedicate to her as well. Donna Sherbondy, directing energy to them, thank you. And for all of our teachers, Lama Zopa Rinpoche is in Nepal right now on lockdown. Just praying Rinpoche will not be affected directly by this because he's a vulnerable health situation. And may you all stay healthy, please. And also for His Holiness the Dalai Lama to remain healthy, all of our great teachers. And I want to thank you so much for joining and look forward to seeing you again. Again, 1:30 to 3 today. And then if you want our practice sessions hosted by the New York Center, that'll start on April 1st, is our next one at 1 o'clock. They're also doing a Tara practice that I think is Tuesday night that's going to be via Zoom that I'm leading, and that's 7 to 9 in the evening. It's easy for us, East Coast time, we're all in the same time zone, unless Thupten Kunga is doing something like that. But maybe we can again join together for group practice because this is one of the mantras His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said to do, the Tara mantra. We'll be doing them during this practice. It takes about an hour and a half or 2 hours. but group practice is very, very beneficial. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you, Tuptenkunga Center, Nicole, and all of you. And what we'll do is stop the recording now.
Thank you so much.